Kia ora koutou and welcome to tonight's Facebook Live with Helen Armstrong, proudly brought to you by Tiny Nation. My name's Erin Maloney. I'm the founding director of Tiny Nation. We're a home-based early learning organisation and we've set out to make a bit of a difference in the early childhood education and care sector. We obviously have our own values that are really focused on secure attachment relationships, the first 1,000 days, early brain development, and all of the nurturing that goes on in those very early and most formative years of life, which is why Helen, who's an early childhood education specialist and who focuses predominantly on infants and toddlers, is with us tonight, and we're really, really excited to have her for our Facebook Live this month. One of our key values here at Tiny Nation is partnership. We work really closely with other services in the community. We work really closely with other like-minded providers in early childhood education, and we're all about sharing the love. So on Random Acts of Kindness Day, it feels quite relevant to be bringing you this Facebook Live and to be sharing this kaupapa with the community and to be bringing Helen to you all so that we can all learn from her experience and her specialty in this space. So I'm going to bring Helen in a minute, and then I'll introduce you to her more formally by sharing her bio, and then we're going to launch straight into it. Helen and I have talked tonight about how we're just going to ride the wave and see where it takes us. We've obviously got some ideas in terms of angles and questions and things that we want to talk a little bit more about. But if any of you out there have any questions, please just let us know, and we will do our best to answer them during the Facebook Live. So just adding Helen in now. Kia ora, Helen, how are you?
Kia ora, Erin. I'm great, thank you. Nice to be here with you.
Cool, thanks so much for joining us. We know you're a bit hectic at the moment, so we really appreciate it.
No, it's good to be here. It's good to stop and slow down for a second and just be present too.
Exactly, have a bit of a convo. So I'm sure many of the people watching out there already know who you are, and we've had really strong interest in tonight's Facebook Live, which is awesome. But for those who don't know Helen, I'm just going to read a little bit of a bio, and I will read it just so that I get everything right, because Helen does come to us with a wealth of experience. She's a leading early childhood education and care specialist with a passion for developing respectful, reciprocal, and authentic relationships with infants and toddlers. With an inclusive and holistic approach, Helen is passionate about how we can explore what it means to have care at the heart of the curriculum, including respectful relationships, quality care moments, rituals, ideal environment setup, and a whole lot more. Helen is also a wealth of knowledge when it comes to managing the complex world of emotions and how to approach an infant or toddler's challenging behaviour with relationship-based lens, setting boundaries, limits, and expectations while also keeping the child at the heart of the matter. Offering knowledge and experience from 12 years of working with children, families, and professionals, Helen is a fully qualified teacher, and she works alongside a number of early childhood education and care services to support them to provide magical places of respect, peace, and simplicity for their tamariki and their families. So welcome, Helen.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Gosh.
And we'll just launch right into it, and I'll ask you the first question I ask every single one of our Facebook Live guests. We're big believers in the power of why here at Tiny Nation, and we've got our own pretty purposeful why and passionate why for why we've set out to do what we do, and I guess have the impact that we want to have at the early childhood education sector. So tell us a little bit more about your why and how you ended up in the space you're in as an ECE specialist doing the work you're doing with tamariki families and teachers.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one actually that I was reflecting on my drive home tonight, because I think your why, well, my why anyway, is actually something that's it's been a part of an evolutionary process. And the first thing that sort of sprung to mind for me that leads me to the place I am now is that I've always found a joy in caring for others since I was very, very young. That's been a present factor in my life. And I think the thing that came to mind for me tonight actually was that I think a lot of this has been prompted by my relationship that I've always had with my brother. So my brother is he's very neurodiverse, and throughout our relationship, I've always been one of his. My family used to call me his other mother, and I think that largely from this, I have learned through my relationship with him how to be a good observer and how to be a good responder. And I think that that has really carried me more and more deeply into this work, rather than just what I initially thought would happen, that I would go through my qualifications and become a teacher. I remember sort of embarking on my study and starting to notice a gap, particularly for infants and toddlers. And at the time, I had a keen interest in this age group. And I guess essentially the more that I started to learn, the more knowledge I gained, the larger the gap appeared. In this age group being what we now recognize as being so crucially important, and yet there's this what I observe as being a gap in what is made available to educators in their training, and also just within the sector itself. So that's I think a huge factor that's led me to where I am now, is seeing this need to really do this age group justice with what we're providing.
Awesome. And I think you're bang on there. I mean, a lot of teachers and educators you talk to do feel, I guess, given the first 1,000 days, the importance of what's going on for infants and toddlers. It's a group that's kind of underrepresented in professional learning and development a lot of the time. So it's awesome to see someone kind of owning the space and really coming in and sharing more about it. So when it comes to infants and toddlers, I know I shared a little bit about our values at the start, and here at Tiny Nation, obviously we're built on respectful, reciprocal relationships and the importance of nurturing those first 1,000 days for our infants and toddlers, and supporting that strong brain development that comes with those secure attachment relationships. A topic that you talk about quite passionately is care as the curriculum, and how to provide respectful care for infants and toddlers. Can you share a little bit more with us about that?
Yeah, so care as curriculum for me, the notion of what it means to hold care at the heart of our curriculum is a recognition that for an infant, a toddler, even a very young child, if they are naturally, consequentially, just because of where they're at in their development, receiving care as a large percentage of how they spend their day, then obviously this is the time spent here is going to matter. And so it's really looking at how we can use an opportunity that is already present, which is within the care, to really, I guess, see this as a vehicle or a potential space for rich learning, for meaning making. So we see the care as a vehicle for relationship, for really rich learning, for things like language, for self-awareness, self-actualization for the child. And the reason that this is so important is that this care situation, and we'll talk a little bit more about what I mean when I refer to a care situation, but the care situation is essentially the home of the child learning about themselves. So because the care directly relates to the child as a person, to their physical personhood, to their development of self identity, things like self-worth, body image, all of these things are coming up when we're looking at what the care holds. And so when we start to see it like that, I think we start to realize that this is not a job to get done. This is not a item on the checklist of my busy day that, because I work with babies and toddlers, just needs to happen. That this is the home and heart of basically everything that is important to the baby, especially, and I can't stress enough how this becomes even more important in a group care environment, because we're naturally in a group care environment having to spread ourselves that little bit more thinly than we would in a one-on-one situation, or even a 1 to 2 or 3. And so this becomes even more of prominent importance, that we focus our energies here on really establishing this solid core and foundation. And so I see this as really the building block that everything else is going to flow from. It's a bit of a source, I suppose, of everything else to come.
Absolutely. And I guess when people hear us talk about relationships and the critical importance of relationships, it's kind of easy to go to that space of, oh, that's, a little bit fluffy, and what does it really mean? And how do you hold that in context, and what's the theory behind all of this? And so we know that the work of Dr. Emmy Pickler and Magda Gerber has obviously influenced that infant toddler space enormously, two pretty well-known theorists in early childhood education, and I know that you obviously follow them and their work quite passionately. So how have they influenced you and your approach as a teacher and a facilitator when it comes to care as the curriculum?
Good question. I think it goes right back to the beginning for me. I think I wouldn't actually be able to tell you where I first kind of came across the work of these two women, but essentially at the very beginning of my my journey in the sector, I started with what they call now RIE Foundations. So I studied the RIE Foundations course, which was not my introduction to the work of Magda Gerber, but definitely my formal introduction anyway. And this was like the ignition of something that I had no idea what would unfold from there. And as I've kind of continued along that pathway, have gone deeper and deeper into the work that really is available to us, the depth of the work that these two women were responsible for bringing to us. And I think if we particularly look at the influence that Pickler can have on the ECE environment in any setting, whether we're talking about older children, even, I think people traditionally see words like RIE, Pickler, Magda Gerber as being for babies and for toddlers. And the thing that I'm continually coming up against or coming across over and over in practice is that essentially what we're seeing is that this is about human relationship. This is about human need and relationship. We all have a need to be seen, heard, understood. We all want to be deeply respected in our intimate relationships. And so this, I think, I've kind of come full circle, really, where I've spent years and years going through this, all these practical applications, all of this theory and research, and that's all very important. And now I'm coming back to this place again where I'm recognizing that, yeah, it is all about the relationship. But the beauty of what we're offered with these two approaches is essentially, if we want to really break it down and simplify it, a how-to guide for relationships with very young children. Because like you've just mentioned, it can be a little bit fluffy, it can be a little bit, and those words are very easy to throw around. Respect is an easy word to throw out there. I very rarely come across a center or an ECE environment where respect is not a word used in the philosophy or somewhere. And yet, what does that look like to us? And what does that look like to the baby? What does that feel like in a tangible sense in our day-to-day interactions and experiences with them? So for me, what the work of Magda Gerber and Dr. Pickler offer us is a very beautifully packaged, very in-depthly researched and proven approach to making this possible, rather than just having it as a little guiding star. Maybe here we have a real lived experience available to us. And so I think that would be, a summary, I suppose, of what their work would mean to me in practice.
Nice. And that kind of leads us quite nicely into the next question. One of Emmy Pickler's most famous quotes is, "It's not enough to say that we love the child, they must feel the results of our care," which leads quite nicely into what you were talking about before in terms of those tangible moments and what does it look and feel like for an infant or a toddler when it comes to care moments. And care moments are spoken about quite a lot. So what are care moments? And what do they look and feel like when you actually get them right as an educator, a teacher, or a parent?
Yeah, good question as well. So a care moment to me is essentially any time we're going to spend caring for or partnering with the child in their care. And there's an important distinction in and of itself as well. So we often see care as, or we describe care as taking care, providing care, or giving care. And what this approach asks us to do is shift that thinking a little bit and see it as care as partnership, as the child as the partner with us in the care. So that to me is, I think, the starting point for what should the care look and feel like. But just to revisit the idea of a care moment, I think the obvious things that stand out, I think, are the things that we sort of have to document. So we can think of things like a nappy change, a bottle feeding, putting a child to sleep, administering medication. But I encourage people to look a little bit deeper than that as well, or maybe look at the finer detail, especially when we're starting to look at this in relationship to older children. Because for babies, the care is very obvious. Where does that exist? Well, it exists in the really kind of standout caregiving situations. For an older child, and also present for a baby, are the more subtle things, such as the wiping of your face after a meal, the adjustment of your jumper if it's ridden up your back, or fixing someone's hair if it's starting to come out of the ponytail. Any interaction that we're about to share with this child that involves my body and my space interacting with your body and your space, we need to see as being a care moment or a care situation. And then if we're considering the care situation or moment as a vehicle for all those things we talked about earlier, the relationship, the language, the learning, the joy, then we can start to now build a picture of what this should look and feel like. And I think here's where the practical application of what it is to be respectful, kind, loving, caring, empathetic, here's where that actually comes in. Because, and your quote that you've used is such a beautiful one, because I say this all the time, kindness, love, respect, all kind of, I guess, buzzwords in the sector. Not enough stand alone, and not enough together either. The child needs to feel and experience those things, and the best way for them to feel and experience those things is in the care. So I always encourage people to put themselves there and imagine what would it feel like to receive the care that the child receives in your hands. What would that feel like for your body? What would that feel like for your emotional state? And what does it feel like? This is another question I'm always asking people to consider. What does it feel like to be a child here at the moment? If a child had just spent the day in my hands, and the marks left by my words, my pace, my tone, my facial expression were visible on their body, what would they leave looking like? And so when we start to kind of look at things like this, people genuinely get a little bit panicky, because we start to really realize, gosh, I spend so much of my day rushing, or I have all of these nappies to change before 11 a.m. And so it does feel like a bit of a task force situation. So for me, the beginning point here is pace, because almost everything changes when we change our pace. So when we start to see the care situation as a vehicle for all these beautiful things, that's the first shift. That's the shift of the lens that I'm seeing this situation through. And then once we've made that shift, we naturally then want to start looking at things like our pace. And if I'm rushing unnecessarily, I was just chatting with someone, a teacher, last week I was chatting with a teacher, and we were talking about how with our bodies, and our body language, and even probably more the unspoken than the spoken, we're always rushing the child. And even when we might not feel that, how present that is. And I said, when I'm conscious of it, I notice how much of the time I will place my hand on a child's back to guide them through a doorway or into the bathroom, and how even just that gesture alone is essentially saying, come on, hurry along, come through. And a baby will reach out to take a wipe or to pick up their clean nappy or something, and my instinct is to take it away, to come and block the action. Why? Because I, even after all these years of practicing this way, am still driven by an efficiency model. And an efficiency model is one of our biggest interfering factors in making care as curriculum possible. So for the baby, we really want to think about what messages does my touch send? And that's coming from here and in here, through my body, through my hands, and into your body. If I rush, if my hands, and our hands, we can't really lie. If we're rushing in here, then it's going to be conveyed in our touch. If I'm doing that, what messages are you receiving about how valuable you are to me in this moment, about how what your body is worthy of being handled like? And these might seem like kind of lofty ideas when we're talking about infants, but this is what we know to be true about this age group. And you've identified that first 1,000 days, is that this is the neural architecture that's being built right now is lifelong. So the ideas that I'm starting to develop from birth about who I am, my place in the world, how much value I have, how I should be treated and handled, begins now. So if a baby has only ever experienced these rushing hands that kind of whip the nappy off, wipe the bottom, whip the nappy back on, pants up, off you go, next child, then these messages that the body receives become essentially muscle memory. And I often wonder, if we had two children, one who was handled in this way and one who was only ever handled with slowness and gentleness and respect, what sort of adults will these children become in terms of what sort of respect they have for themselves, what they will demand in terms of how they'll be treated in relationship, how their bodies will be, how they will uphold their own bodies in dignity, uphold their own mana. And so essentially, it's pace, it's handling, it's tone, it's talking the child through. I mean, one of the simplest things we can do is to talk the child through everything, and not in a way that is explaining or explanatory of things as they're happening or after they're happening, but in a way that is invitational. Because essentially what we want the care to be is a partnership. And my language, so first of all my pace, and then my language, my body language and my verbal language are going to dictate whether you are a partner or whether you're a passenger in this care situation. And I know if it was me receiving the care, I would much prefer to be a partner than to be a passenger. And then I just remembered a conversation I had with someone over the weekend as well. We were talking about this idea of kindness and these words being buzzwords. And I used this example. I said to him, if I was in hospital and I was receiving, say, for example, I was receiving an IV line, and the nurse came in and she was kind of distracted and she was rushing. She wasn't really present, and she's kind of just butchering it. She's doing a really bad job. And I'm kind of receiving this care, but she's still kind. She's still sort of, so there's all these more kind of maybe more fluffy ideas here that are still present. How do I feel about her care? I don't really care so much as to whether she's being kind to me. I care a whole lot more about how she's actually carrying out the care she's providing me. So I think, and I'm not dismissing things like kindness and gentleness and love and all those things, but I'm saying that they must hold hands with what we know to be true about best practice. And for the baby, that is, or the toddler or the young child, that is to be a partner with you in the care that we are engaging with together. So it's probably a bit of a long-winded answer for the question.
So many key takeaways there, and I love how you talk about a care moment being when my space interacts with your space and physical being and the imprint that has, and what do we want that imprint to look like if we could physically see it. Yeah, beautiful. So in terms of, and this next question is kind of related to those care moments and I guess the concept of care as curriculum, and it came from one of our followers who pushed this question through to us ahead of tonight, wanting to know, obviously, and you kind of have touched on it, in a busy environment where there are a number of children, and those children might range in age, so you might not have the luxury of being in I guess an infant or toddler room where you can tailor it specifically to that age group, but more of a mixed age setting. How do you approach that with that care as the curriculum lens?
So I think it's important to acknowledge that in a mixed age setting, my experience and my personal experience and also professional experience is that it's a lot harder. And I want to just say that from the get-go, because I think there are a lot of people working in these kind of environments who are being very hard on themselves and who are almost feeling like, what I don't want people to envisage is a picture-perfect image of what this should look like that they're striving to copy and paste. And I think that it's about making it work for each individual circumstance. So if we're looking particularly at a mixed age situation, one of the first things that I want people to consider is how we can simplify what we have going on. So a lot of the time when I see basically the broader the age group, the wider the age range, the more complex this is to apply and maintain and have working as a well-oiled machine. And so when we get a little bit ahead of ourselves, we enter overwhelm. And the most common thing that I see there is people saying it doesn't work. This doesn't work because of X, Y, and Z, and so we throw in the towel. And I often will see that that's because we've gone almost beyond where we really needed to, or we're trying to do too much. So say, for example, we've got a couple of younger babies, maybe we've got a toddler, and then maybe I've got a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old in the environment, just to kind of throw an example out there. And I'm trying to meet these needs of these older children, and I'm offering all these sort of majorly tactile, messy play or art experiences, and then I'm also trying to juggle my time between the babies. No one's really winning. And so when we try and kind of aim for the middle to keep everybody happy, we end up falling short in a lot of areas. And so where I want people to sort of anchor their focus is, the basics is the wrong word, but maybe we look at foundation instead. And we look at developing a really solid foundation, and we see everything else as the icing on the cake. Because I believe we've been sold a little bit of a lie in the early childhood sector about what education should really look like. Essentially, what the child needs is to be anchored in relationship. And this goes for all children in early childhood environments, right up to the age of, if they're staying till 5 or 6, I don't care. Relationship is still the most important. So when we focus there and we look at then the care moments as the vehicle for relationship, even for a 5 or 6-year-old, this is still true, then I worry less about everything else I'm trying to achieve. And I trust that if foundation is solid, what they will experience in their free and interdependent play, and we'll talk about that in a bit as well, is going to be enough for them, that I don't need to provide this constant smorgasbord of entertainment and stimuli and activity. If I'm really nailing the care and I'm focusing on relationship, and then my environment, and maybe that's something we can talk about too, about environment, then my environment as the third teacher sort of does the rest, then I have the capacity to pour more into the care situation. So I often will see teachers rushing around, setting up activities, packing down activities, cleaning children up from activities, and then having this tiny snippet of time left over for the caregiving. And we're kind of going, oh, it's always rushed and I don't have time to give the time and the energy I want to, or the presence I want to the care situation. But if we flipped the priority on its head and said, we won't worry about that. And I tell people, even just for, let's say for this month, we won't worry about those things. We'll focus our energies here. We'll just see what happens. And the feedback from that is usually, you know what, the children have become so much more settled because they are established in a predictable rhythm or choreography, and there are predictable sort of rituals around things, that they have the fuel then to enter the play in a way that we weren't seeing before. And that in turn means that there is less need for us to run around creating activities and engagement and entertainment for them. So simplifying things in a mixed stage environment is going to be your best friend, and coming back always, and it's a continual process. I'm always coming back to my core. What does it feel like to be a child here at the moment? What is my priority? Am I prioritizing the wrong things? And then in the same breath, am I overcomplicating even the care situation itself? I'm not suggesting that to be meaningful, a care situation needs to have candles and ambiance and flowers everywhere and anything like that. It's about how we show up to the moment more so than what we can construct around the moment. Yeah.
Awesome. Great advice. How we show up to the moment, that's pretty powerful, right?
Yeah.
So just following on from care moments, and we're trying to get through a whole lot of information tonight. So and you're giving us some great contextual examples, which is awesome. One of the things we angst about as parents, as teachers and educators is the word routine and where that fits for children when it comes to their day-to-day lives with us. And we're now starting to hear the word ritual a whole lot more, and interchangeably in ECE settings when we're talking about changing kind of those mundane routines into more magical and special rituals. And we know that when done right, rituals are actually a really important way to foster that strong sense of belonging and nurturing and help children feel emotionally safe and secure. So the next question for you is, what do rituals, it's a bit of a tongue tie, look like in early childhood services, and what ideas do you have for teachers and educators that are watching in terms of ways to create those special rituals and special rhythms for children who are in their care?
Yeah, I think it's a really timely conversation at the moment. What I think needs to happen when we talk about rituals is we'll come back to what we talked about in the very beginning, is the why. So a lot of the time what I'm seeing happening in practice is what we believe is the development of a ritual becoming something that maybe is a little bit beyond our current capacity, maybe, and actually a lot of the time, some of it is also to do with what is actually age and developmentally appropriate for the children, and when it comes to building a ritual. So I like to look at, so let's replace the word routine with the word rhythm, because routine has a connotation of kind of, okay, what's on the whiteboard today, at 8 o'clock it's this, at 10 o'clock it's mat time, all that kind of stuff. Rhythm is that there is still a sense of predictability, but we are more led by the promptings of the children. So rhythm is rather than what is it time for, rhythm tells us to consider what the child is showing us instead. So rather than what is it time for, what is the child showing me? What is the child telling me? Ritual is how we go about that. So in the same context as we use the word ritual, I use the word choreography a lot, that's my Pickler background, is because essentially we're talking about the same thing. I like an example that we can relate to, and so just yesterday I experienced a real life example that made me consider this. I had a friend come to my house who, due to level 3 restrictions where I haven't seen for a very long time, and she walked in my door, and we are both major tea drinkers. That's how we bond, that's how we sit and chat. And she walked in my door and she said, "Oh, the jug's already on." And her whole being relaxed in that moment. Now, it really made me think about how and why we build ritual into the practices that we have with children. So a ritual or a choreography is essentially a way of holding the children in a way that they can relax into knowingness, right? So my friend walking in the door and seeing the jug on, her being relaxes into knowingness because she has a sense of what comes next. Wow. It's in her muscle memory, in her emotional memory, in her cognitive memory. It's now we sit, we cradle a cup of tea, we talk, we relax, we rest together, we share our hearts. So for a child, a ritual, let's use an example of when I come to the table, when I'm welcomed to the Kai table, there is a process I go through where my caregiver helps me to clean my hands with a nice warm flannel. Now, because she soaked the flannels in some nice warm lavender water before, they have a particular smell to them that triggers a memory or an association with this experience. Then we sit at the table and we sing our karakia. All these little cues are consistent and predictable, and that helps the child to relax into knowingness. When I can relax into knowingness, I'm free to fully participate, right? So when I know what comes next, I'm empowered. And that's not just true for babies, that's true for us as well, right? Like when I know, okay, what's my day gonna hold? Even though sometimes I think I know and then I don't. But if I know what my day will hold, I'm empowered and I can step into knowingness, which frees me to be fully engaged. When I'm on the back foot and I don't know what's coming next, I'm in a stress state. And so I'm constantly thinking about how I am, what I'm going to do, how I'll respond. So the ritual, the choreography is providing the child with a sense of knowingness, this calm and this rest that is available in pattern and order and predictability. So I think, again, keeping it simple is really key, especially for infants and toddlers. So the older the child, I guess, the more detailed the ritual can become. So maybe if we take that same example, that's a beautiful way of doing it with 2-year-olds, that we really just, part of the ritual is we clean our hands together, we sing our karakia, we dish out these plates, and maybe, they're beautiful plates. We hope that things are beautiful and visually appealing as well. And then at the end, we go through a hand washing process again, and that's my cue that the mealtime is over. And so this whole thing in and of itself has a choreography that when both dance partners know the choreography, we can dance together pretty beautifully. When only one of us knows the choreography, the other one is on the back foot and they're not fully able to participate. They're also not going to enjoy the dance. In fact, they're probably going to feel very uncomfortable. So choreography is a beautiful word because it does lead us to thinking about the care situation or the ritual as a dance. And if I'm a really good leader in the dance, I want my partner to feel that they know exactly what to expect and how to participate. So with an older child, maybe bring a candle to the table. Maybe we would bring some flowers to the table. Maybe for an older child, they participate in helping to set and prepare the table, and that's part of the ritual for them. What we just want to be conscious of is not tacking on things like flowers and candles and lovely things like that for the sake of it, because that's not what's the most important thing. And I do see that happening, and all that does is stress the adult out. So thinking, I've got to have all of this and I've got to set it up like this. And I remember working with a team, and they had tablecloths for their babies and toddlers, and I observed, as I always do when I'm working with a team, I sit and I observe for some time. I observed in one meal time a teacher say 12 times at morning tea time, 12 times these words left her mouth: please don't pull on the tablecloth. Please leave the tablecloth. I won't let you pull the tablecloth. And our adult brain thinks this tablecloth makes the table look beautiful. This is part of the ritual. This is what we need to make this meaningful. The 2-year-old brain sees something, has an urge, which is urgent, and they can't not do it. So we need to look at that situation and really ask ourselves again, come back to the beginning. Why? Who's it for? What's it achieving?
Yeah. Awesome comments coming through, Helen, just about how beautifully you explained that, and the word choreography, and I guess all of the images it conveys, like you say, about it being a dance and being a partnership. It kind of all comes back to what you started talking about originally around those care moments too, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So while we're speaking about the 2-year-olds that obviously have the urges that are urgent, sometimes despite our best intentions, and I know this as a mum myself very well, all of our best laid plans can get very messy sometimes, because relationships are messy and emotions are messy, and sometimes emotions get heightened both by us as the parent or the teacher or the educator, and the infant or toddler or child that we are caring for. So how do you manage all of that through the lens of care as the curriculum, and taking into account everything you've talked about in terms of the relationship? What do you do when emotions get complex and behaviours get challenging? And this is probably the $1 million question that everyone wants to know.
It's the $1 million question. Yeah, it's the hot seat question for sure. I'll phone a friend if that's okay. Gosh, I think you sum it up when you say relationships are messy. One of my favorite, I guess, comments that I get frequently is, I tried it and it didn't work. Because it's so interesting to me that we want to apply a strategy to a human being who has free will and expect an outcome as if we had pressed a button. And I think that the most important thing to really recognize when we're working with, no matter what age human being we're working with, is that we aren't working with robots. We're working with human beings, free and equal human beings, who are going to have strong expressions of emotion, and I tell this is probably my most common little phrase that I share with parents when I work with them about toddlers, and it's that it is your child's job to disagree with you. So we may as well buckle in and get used to it now, because this little person has their own independent mind, and that's a good and beautiful thing. What makes it really challenging is that we hope to have a little arsenal of strategies that are going to equip us for something that's going to look peaceful, harmonious, and beautiful at all times. And it's just never going to happen. So peace, even if we look at the word peace is not about things being perfect all the time. Peace is about how I am within myself. So I could have a nappy change situation with a child who really doesn't want to have the nappy changed, and there's not a lot I can do to convince him otherwise in this moment. And I can still walk away from that and feel that it was peaceful. Why? Because I maintained my peace. So I think that the primary thing to consider is that I cannot, and I don't actually want to, even though it feels like I do, I cannot control how you show up to the situation. I can only control how I show up. You are responsible for your own reaction to that. So when we're met with a child, and we will be met with a child who doesn't want to be there, doesn't want to receive the care, or in any context, whether we've drawn a boundary, whether we have said, yeah, you know what, actually it is time for bed now, regardless of what it is, we still get to choose how we show up in the moment. So yeah, I've got a child who maybe is fighting me on this, who is really upset, who is showing me how much they disagree with me. My job is not to enter that chaotic state with them. My job is to maintain my sense of leadership, because that's what the child is still looking for in us. Yes, we're free and equal human beings in partnership, but the child still needs a confident leader in us, which is really tricky to find that balance. So I want to maintain, I guess, a sense of calm. And even if I have to fake it till I make it, that's okay. I often encourage people to develop a mantra or a phrase that they can sort of say to themselves. So for some parents, that means a Post-it note on the wall in every room, because at the moment I'm being triggered in every room of the house. And before we do that, actually, we have to identify the triggers first. So what gets me to the point where I need to take a little step back? One of my favorite quotes, this is actually my desktop on my computer because it's so, I need it in my life. Viktor Frankl, he says, between stimulus and response, there is space, and within the space lies our freedom. And I'm trying my best to live by this, because it is so easy to be triggered towards reactiveness. And what the child needs from us is response. And there is a very big difference between response and reaction. So when I get this kind of kicking, screaming, I don't want to be here reaction from you, and I come back with reactiveness myself, explosive situation. When I see your explosiveness as nothing personal, in fact, I expect it, because I know what's going on in your little brain, and I know that actually you don't have the capacity to control that right now. I come at it from a perspective of, oh, okay, interesting. You really don't want to be here right now. You're telling me, so acknowledgement is super, super important. You're telling me you didn't want to come. You didn't want to get changed. You were having such a great time outside. Wow, you're really mad about it. Because again, let's come back to that human need. I need to be seen. I need to be heard. I need to be understood. So the last thing we want when we're in rage or when we're in frustration is to be told to calm down, to be quiet, especially, I don't know, maybe that's me personally, but if someone tells me, no one in the history of humanity ever calms down by being told to calm down, basically. So let's just meet them in that place. Wow, yeah, you're so upset with me, or you're feeling so mad about this situation. In a way, and we want the language to be authentic around this, so I don't want to script it too much, but we basically want to say, I see you, I hear you, I understand you. And then in the same breath, we want to send a message that says, here's how we're going to go about this. Because the child is not pushing or testing in order to be given free rein. They're just having an emotional response to something, and they need us to be the calm, confident, consistent leader. So listen, validate, acknowledge, and carry on with confidence would be my messaging there.
Beautiful. And I think that's so important. You talk about showing up, and you talk about showing up in a lot of different ways. And we are heavily influenced at Tiny Nation by the work of Brené Brown. It's and she talks a lot, social scientist from the States, she talks a lot about the power of vulnerability and the power of showing up. And even though she's not directly in the early childhood space, there's just so much relevance in the way that we communicate and the way that we are engaging and interacting. And that's really what relationships are all about, right? Especially when they get tricky. She talks about always looking people in the eye, and even when you can't say something, or even when you're trying to manage your own feelings, about staying with the moment and kind of, being there. So yeah, important part of those care moments when things go awry.
Absolutely.
Cool. So we talked a little bit earlier about, and you said you were going to get to it, and I know we're kind of cracking on and we're starting to fill up the last few minutes of the live interview, but play is a big topic, and you'll probably talk about it being another buzzword, this whole learning through play phenomena in early childhood education, and I guess more so how we do it in a really authentic way. And so we know that play is the work of the child, and it's really important to create environments in which they can really explore their curiosity and find that joy through play. You talk about environments being the third teacher, which is really kind of key, especially when you're working on that relationship and fostering that sense of belonging. So how do we, I guess, create an environment and a curriculum that really sets up and encourages play, free, independent play, but also intentional teaching that kind of scaffolds that play in a way that promotes that learning for children?
Gosh, there's a huge topic. I think. I think so. It's a beautiful summary, I suppose, to the idea of care as curriculum, because not only is the care the learning in and of itself, but the care is also the care and the relationship, which to me are one and the same. What they do is they fill up this tank, this whatever we want to call it. That I'll stay away from the word love maybe, and I might use the word connection instead. We call it a connection tank, and the child uses connection as the fuel source. So I think that has to remain our priority when we're looking for independent play. And I'll actually replace that word too if I can, because to me, there is no such thing as an independent baby or an independent. I don't think there's such a thing as an independent human being. We all need relationship. We all succeed in life because of others. But so what we're looking for is interdependence, and what that means is because of your relationship, not outside of it, but through the relationship. I will play, I will learn, I will be self-motivated, I will be intrinsically motivated towards the work and the learning that is natural to me through my play. So I guess two components here, the full tank and then the maintenance of the connection. So what's important that we really understand is, and this I think is where we get it wrong sometimes, is that we think, okay, I'll care for them, I'll fill up this little tank, and then he can go. He can be away from me and he can be independent. And it's that disconnect that is causing issues and preventing that real freedom in play. If we see it instead as, when you come into relationship with me and we are together in the care situation, we have this closeness, this connectedness, and then as you leave my immediate presence, this thread sort of unravels between us, and it doesn't snap, it doesn't fray, it doesn't totally disappear, but we just kind of wind it out, but we remain connected throughout the rest of the time we're going to be apart. What that means is that the child knows where to find you, or knows where to find somebody who would be equally as safe as you if it's not going to be you, that they could maybe glance at you across the room and just have a moment of shared kind of knowingness between you. Maybe that's going to be enough, or that maybe I'll need to come back and check in with you. So we need that availability of that connection at all times, basically. And that doesn't mean that the same person always has to be available to the child. That just means that we are acknowledging and respecting the need to remain in connectivity with an anchor, with a safe place and a source of energy, which is the relationship. And then those two components, the full tank and the connectedness being maintained, those two components are held by the environment. So when I talk about the environment as a third party, basically what I'm saying is that when you're not in my arms, you will be in the arms of the environment. So my environment must be safe, it must be secure, it must be stimulating but not overwhelming. We want to think, and to me, you mentioned the word intentional teaching. To me, intentional teaching is being the curator of an environment that is the third teacher, an environment that can hold the child when the child's not in my arms. So I observe, as an intentional teacher, I observe because I know the children, because I'm in relationship with them first and foremost. I observe their inclinations in play. I observe their dispositions, their urges, their learning behaviors, and I am continuously morphing and evolving my environment to say yes to what I see happening for you. So again, if we come back to my thinking around activities or entertainment or kind of, more structured adult-led things, there's a lot of me running around doing things to keep you engaged. Whereas as an intentional teacher, what I'm going to do more of is constructing an environment that you will be able to engage with very autonomously, without me needing to be there saying, don't put that in your mouth, keep this here, don't take that out of the sandpit or whatever, that the environment really belongs to the child. And when the environment belongs to the child belongs in the environment, the learning is just a natural default from there. So we're talking about the physicality of the environment, so safe, secure, practical, and then we're also talking about what the environment contains, so meaningful loose parts. If I've got a lot of, people will often say to me, oh, how do I stop my toddlers from swiping everything off the shelves? That's all they want to do. And I say, yeah, because they can't not do it. There's a part of the premature brain structure that is literally saying, swipe this stuff off, go on, get in there and swipe. So how can we see that? And instead of seeing that as a problem, how can I see this as, okay, here's a prompt for me to be responsive to within the environment. That's me becoming intentional with my teaching. What can I provide you that will satisfy this urge? Instead of trying to change the child, I change my environment depending on what the child shows me.
Yeah. Awesome. Wow. We're at the end. 8:28. I've got one question to pose for you. I feel like each of the questions I've asked you is probably a day-long workshop, and you've done incredibly well to give us a very quick 5-minute summary. But just for those teachers and educators and parents who are watching tonight and who want to know more, we know you're obviously really heavily involved in the professional learning and development space and the sector, and you also offer tailored workshops and opportunities for families to come in and be a part of your kaupapa too. If anyone listening wants to get in touch with you or wants to find out more about what you've got coming up, and we know Helen's got some great events coming up in a couple of key regions across the country, and we're hoping that some of our Tiny Nation educators will be able to benefit from that as well. And there are some obviously fabulous workshops that deep dive on some of the questions we've asked tonight, like I say, and probably do a whole lot more justice. So how are people to contact you and connect with you and engage with your work?
Thank you for asking. So everything will be available on my website, which is actually just www.helenarmstrong.co.nz, and I've got, like you said, regional events all throughout the year in most of the main centres around the country for professionals. And so all my events are on the website. And then more recently, I've just launched an online training for teachers around building relationship. What does attunement look like for infants and toddlers, and all of that beautiful stuff, which is beginning 23rd of September. So that's an opportunity for anyone, wherever you are in the country. But other than that, all my events are on my website, and my contact details there for working one-on-one or with individuals in centre environments. So just get in touch. I'm always happy to answer questions. My Facebook page as well. So
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you so much for your time tonight and for so generously coming on live with us and pushing it out to a wide audience. I know everyone here, there's a lot of thank yous coming up for your pearls of wisdom, some great takeaways, some great snippets. And for anyone watching who didn't catch the whole live, we do have it recorded under our live tab on the Tiny Nation Facebook page, so you can access it there anytime or flick it on to anyone who you think might find it a bit useful. But thanks again, Helen. You've been awesome, and we could have probably gone on all night. But we hope again and do more work with you. Definitely. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And ka kite everyone out there, and have a great rest of the week and rest of the year, because it's winding up before we know it. So we'll look forward to coming back and sharing another Facebook Live later on in September. Thanks, Helen.
Thanks. See you, Erin.